another thing that's fascinated me in my travels and studies of the spirituality and religion of other cultures is to see that in ancient times there was no word for spirituality. In fact, if we look at ancient Eastern and indigenous traditions, they didn't have the word at all. The closest thing they had was an expression that basically meant a way of being, or being human fully. And so we start to use that as a reference point to understand that spirituality is a living expression. And if we understand that spirituality is a living expression and it's based on experience, well, then the next natural question is, how do I have that experience? How do I have an experience of awakening that's going to change the way that I see the world, that's going to help me to understand this consciousness and divine God realization that everyone's talking about? Well, this became the very heart of the book that I wrote, Return to the Sacred. And it focuses on this astounding realization that there are spiritual practices that all of our cultures share, that are timeless, that we find all over the world. And in fact, there aren't even that many if you add them up. So I've summarized more or less 12, and you can think of your own, but when we talk about spiritual practices, we're talking about things like yoga, meditation, prayer, ceremonies that you might find in different places of worship. It comes through song, it comes through movement. So there's different ways to come to the divine, and they express the different kinds of, you might say, spiritual personalities that we have. So one of my most common sort of words of advice for people, find a spiritual practice that works for you and stick to it. You know, expecting a spiritual practice to give to you right away and suddenly be awakened right away is like digging a hole 3 feet, being frustrated that you haven't found water yet, and then moving 3 feet over and starting a new hole. Sometimes you need to put a little effort into it. Sometimes it needs to take a little time. We need to cultivate the self, overcome some of our baggage, let go some of our old stories about life so we can awaken to what's always been waiting within. But there's one missing step for most people, because there's a lot of people out there who have spiritual practices. So I like to say, remember, spirituality is a 2-step process if you really want to awaken. 1, find some kind of a practice, something you can do every day that connects you to a sense of meaning and peace and intention. And 2, learn to apply that to the rest of your day. So it's fine if you go to church and you feel holy and connected, but if you're a jerk in the parking lot, that's not really a living spirituality. You can go to a yoga class and feel peaceful and blissed out, and all the stresses of life melt away. And then you're at the grocery store and you're judging the person in line in front of you because you've just got your yogurt and your tofu and they've got 18 things in the 12-item or less aisle. That's not a living spirituality. Someone even said to me recently, could golf be my spiritual practice? And I said, well, it depends. Are you often angry and competitive when you golf? He said, no, I mean it. He said, when I golf, I feel the peace of the day. I feel myself slowing down. I focus on only what I'm doing, and everything comes into perspective. And you got to hang out with me when I'm golfing. He said, I am at my best. I'm fun, I'm easygoing. But then the question becomes, so how are you when you're at home? And he said, the total opposite. So I said, great, golf. Golf your brains out. But pay attention to those qualities while you golf. Pay attention to those characteristics and experiences, and then ask yourself, how could I carry that into the way I treat my friends, my family members, my coworkers? That's when it becomes a spiritual practice. It's when you take what you learn in those sacred moments and then apply it in the rest of your life. When we talk about spiritual experience, sometimes I notice people start to get a little bit of a faraway look in their eyes, like, what are you talking about, spiritual experience? Or they distance themselves from it. They think, well, that's something the saints have. That's something the sages and the shamans have and the mystics. That's not me. But I believe that everyone has spiritual experiences. In fact, we're having them all the time. The problem is that we don't often stop to recognize them. In fact, if you have never had someone point one out to you, you might not even notice how often you are encountering it. And it's not uncommon if a person, let's say, goes hiking all the time, and then they take a friend with them on the same hike that they've done 100 times, but the friend's a botanist. And they say, oh, do you notice this low-growing plant right here? Well, that's a medicine. And these leaves, they look like leaves, but those are actually the flowers of that plant. And you'd say, I've passed that 100 times and I never knew it. But now that you bring my attention to it, I will never forget it. And the same is true of your drive home from work. You might pass a place 1,000 times until someone says, oh, have you been into that music store? What music store? And it's been there all along. So when we're playing with our children, when we're doing the dishes, sometimes just when we maybe get home late and the house is quiet, and all of a sudden the busyness of the day just stops and we just find ourselves sitting there. We don't want to get up from the couch. We don't even need to turn on the television. We're just having a moment. And everything seems peaceful, and everything feels like it's going to be okay. That's a connection to the sacred.